Welcome to Master Your Merger, the podcast for leaders navigating the people side of mergers and acquisitions. Each week, your host Klint Kendrick talks with deal makers, HR leaders, and integration experts to uncover what really works when it comes to people, culture, and performance during a deal. From retaining top talent to aligning leadership, you'll hear real stories and actionable insights from the people doing the work, all designed to help you make your merger work. If you're leading through M&A, this is your weekly playbook.
Welcome to the Master Your Merger podcast. Today's guest is Steven Rosenberg, a seasoned leader with deep expertise at the intersection of corporate development, strategy, and the people side of M&A. Over his career, Steve has led dozens of transactions for leading global companies like MMC Mercer, Thomson Reuters, and Wipro, driven transformational growth initiatives, managed complex integrations, and helped organizations create long-term value, not just through smart deals, but through smart people strategies. With experience spanning investment banking, corporate development, and HR M&A, Steven brings a unique perspective on the overall deal process and how HR can and should show up as a strategic partner in every stage of the deal lifecycle. He's also a sharp observer of emerging trends like AI's role in deal making and how governance and workforce strategy are evolving to keep pace. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Clint. Pleasure to be here. I appreciate you reaching out and making the time, and I'm looking forward to this discussion.
I am too. Well, you have such a fascinating background. You've covered all different parts of the deal lifecycle. So I'm really curious, what took you from investment banking to corp dev and then into HR?
Yeah, it's a road that I didn't map out specifically, just went on the journey. And like a lot of people in their careers, they find themselves looking back on their career and how did I get here? Like the Talking Head song. Anyway, I started out in investment banking, working for a few boutiques, bringing companies public, raising capital in private placements, doing mergers for companies. Found myself moving up the ladder there and then joining a well-known middle-tier boutique, Oppenheimer and Company, and started just doing deals. I would fly out to Silicon Valley every month and try to win a deal. That process really gave me the building blocks, the foundation of how do you find the right companies? How do you bring the company in, sell, business development, corporate development, understanding the finances of a deal, basically trying to win a deal over your competition. And at that point, we were doing the same thing. We were bringing companies public or selling them, being on the sell side of the deal. And then I made a move to the corporate side. I wanted to work for a company and help build a company up to be the best that they could be and do that through corporate development and business development. And found myself at a technology company that was competing with the Bloombergs and the Reuters of the world at the time, very heavily financed by private equity. And they were building a new data business, which I was very intrigued by. And to do that, they needed to strike joint ventures, strike strategic partnerships, sell some of their assets, buy some assets. And it was an interesting opportunity. And within a year, I was acquired by Reuters. And so that path just evolved from there. Next thing I know, I'm doing that for Reuters for 5 years. And I went to one of their competitors, Thomson Corporation, and worked for the president of strategy there. And that was all about how do we build the company up inorganic. So now I'm starting to learn. Now I have the investment banking, I have the business development, I have the corporate development side. Now I'm learning strategy, working for the president of strategy. And it's all about, okay, here's our path. How can we grow quicker and wider inorganically? And that was through, again, strategic partnerships, joint ventures, investments, and acquisitions. And they were a big company that had a lot of cash and wound up acquiring Reuters. So it became Thomson Reuters. I was part of the deal team, worked on the integrations, wound up becoming head of America's business development and corporate development. And then after the integration, a year after that, the great financial crisis hit and I left. I wanted to do a startup of my own, and that was my chance, and went for it. Did a startup in the technology space, information data, AI, an earlier machine language sentiment analysis platform. Entrepreneur at heart, and I felt like this is the way to go. The 21st century, and I saw the companies were still relying on 20th century information to transact, to manage risk, to invest. And I wound up finding a co-founder out of Israel and a team. And we built this machine learning platform to measure sentiment, and did that for a number of years and needed to collect a paycheck again. And that's when MMC Mercer came calling. And that's what kind of pulled me into this HR side of M&A. And I say that only because I came in to, again, help build Mercer's business inorganically. I wasn't going out and consulting for clients. I was working for the company and doing, again, the strategic partnerships, doing the investments, the joint ventures, the acquisitions, sourcing the deals, doing the diligence, managing the teams, working side by side with MMC since they were the parent company, their corporate development team, and wound up working on, from an acquisition standpoint, over a dozen transactions, divestitures, investments, ran a global alliances business as well. And I really got to know, because of Mercer, the HR side of business, human capital management. And so I really got to know what it takes for the value of HR, the value of human capital, the value of that for even M&A, and just grew from there. And that lasted to COVID. After COVID, so I spent about 9 years there. I wanted to expand again my knowledge around technology and wound up taking a corporate development role with Wipro, the big India consulting firm, and basically worked on deals that would build up digital transformation. Worked on one of their largest deals in their history. I sourced it, I led the diligence teams, I negotiated it, soup to nuts, worked on a bunch of other deals for them. But again, culture-wise, it wasn't the right fit. And then I said, let me get into consulting. And that brought me to Willis Towers Watson, similar company to Mercer, but now I'm on the consulting side. I'm working with companies on partnering and advising them on the M&A transaction. And did that for about a year or so, and then been consulting ever since.
That's fantastic. You have such a rich background, Stephen. You've done acquisitions where you've led the integrations, you led the deal, you've done the sourcing. I mean, really are one of the few people I know that has touched every aspect of the deal-making process. And you've been part of the strategy teams at really high levels. And yet, I know one of your passions is getting HR to the table. So what are some of the most common reasons HR gets left out of these early deal conversations? And what are the consequences of that?
It's a great question, great observation. We all recognize that. And it's something I learned or experienced earlier on in my career in corporate development. There's, in a corporation or a company, there's at least up until recently, and I won't say this is what it is now, because I think there's a lot more understanding of the value of HR in a deal. But the way deals start, corporate development runs in their own silo in a way. They're focused on working with the business leaders to understand how they're going to grow the business. They build up their 3 to 5 year strategic plan of going out and acquiring the inorganic strategic plan. Who do we need to acquire? What do we need to bring in? What assets, what resources, what IP? They start sourcing. They start reaching out to companies. They start working with PE firms and the investment bankers. And so now they're tunnel vision on how we're going to grow the company. They're building up their pipeline and their funnel, and they're communicating that pipeline and funnel to the business leaders and to the CFO, but very rarely to the HR department. HR is viewed as a transactional piece of the deal, not as a strategic piece. Again, earlier on, I do believe there are practitioners, there are corporate development leaders like myself and M&A leaders that do now recognize the value of HR and are starting to pull them in earlier. And
it is shifting a bit.
It is shifting a bit because the work you're doing, the work that other people are doing, the work that I try to do to communicate it. You see a lot of press out there, why deals fail, and a lot gets pointed at culture and people side of the transaction. And who owns that? And really, HR does own people and culture. And I think executive committees and CEOs are starting to push down onto the rest of the business that this needs to change. And I do believe HR leaders are understanding their value more and are pushing up.
So we talk about HR having a seat at the table, Steve, and you talk a little bit about the psychology of the deal makers. I feel like there's something behind that either HR leaders miss. Is it about HR leaders showing up differently to earn that seat at the table? Is it about corp dev inviting HR early? Is it both? What is that all about in your mind?
It's definitely both. I'm a big proponent of empowering HR to, not just have a seat at the table, but to take that seat, meaning they need to be empowered to feel like they understand the process enough, understand their value to the process and their value to a deal, and then go bang on the door and say, hey, we need to be part of the table. When I say the table, right, you envision, I've had many of these readouts, these sit downs, and they happen two ways, right? They happen on a regular basis where you're sharing your pipeline with the CFO and sometimes the CEO and business leaders, and you're going through, here's what's happening on a deal front. We're here and here on certain opportunities, taking everybody's temperature. And what I pull in and what I empower other people to pull in is HR to have a seat there. They should be understanding what are the deals that are in the pipeline, and they should have a voice to it because CHROs, they know their culture of their company. They understand the resources they have. They should understand the resources they need. They should also understand competitive landscape and how their competitors operate from a people perspective and a culture perspective. And that's invaluable information that should be presented during these readouts, these meetings. And then the ad hoc meetings, when a deal does come in, let's say from a investment bank, you get a SIM, hey, we know this is the business you're looking for, or this might interest you. What do you think? Yeah. Usually the head of corporate development, the process is you take the first pass, you read through it, checks off some of the strategic criteria of the opportunity. This might be something we could look at. Let's now bring it to the business leader of the business in the company. What do you think? If there's further interest, then you start going a little bit further down the rabbit hole, right? You start digging through, does it check off the boxes? You then share this with the CFO and possibly the CEO. It needs to be shared with HR because that SIM's going to have critical data, critical information about the makeup of the company from a people perspective, right? Where the people sit, what does the organization look like? Some high-level financials around this. And it's really important that you get HR's read in immediately. So just answering your question, empowering the HR leader to knock on that door and say, hey, we need to be at this table because what we do is invaluable for the growth of this organization, valuable for the survival of this organization. And so anything you're going to do from an M&A perspective, inorganic perspective, we need to be there. And they should feel confident to knock on that door. For them to feel confident, they need to truly understand what is M&A? What's the process look like? What does it take to go from screening to closure? What's their value? So as long as they understand that, that's great. They knock on the door. Similarly, corporate development needs to understand the value that HR brings to the table and why you need to have them at the table earlier rather than later when it's a transactional process.
Do you have an example of where bringing HR in early really made a difference?
I have plenty of examples. Probably one or two deals where HR had a loud voice, felt confident enough to bang the table saying, this company will, while the business case looks good, while the financials, the strategic, the synergies, the revenue synergies might look really great, this will be a mess to integrate, right? The culture is not the same. The culture is going to be an issue, and this could set us back. And I've seen where respected HR leaders really bang the table enough where a CEO said, you know what, pause. And on the flip side, HR pounding the table in agreement with the point of view of the business leader and some others, and getting them behind you early enough to pound that table makes it easier for a deal to go through.
That's fantastic to hear. That I often hear from our colleagues that HR is seen as a blocker in a lot of occasions because we point out those risks to the financial pieces. So what are some ways that HR can build that relationship so that it's seen as, no, this isn't blocking anything. This is really about long-term success of the company. How do we earn that trust with corp dev teams and really speak that language of value creation that gets heard?
Yeah, I think, well, part of that is the relationship that corporate development has with HR. If you keep it transactional, meaning, again, there's no strategic sense brought to a deal from an HR perspective, corporate development doesn't value HR's opinion, it's going to be a fight. And it's going to be where there's issues that are brought up, where there are red flags that HR uncovers. They're going to bang the table themselves to cause some friction in it. Whereas if you respect and you bring them in early enough and you have a great relationship with HR, you're able to talk it through, you're able to make sense of it, you're able to identify the red flags and see if you can mitigate them or not, and expose some of those early enough to HR. What we've all seen, a lot of work's been done. The data rooms now fill, and you're now getting HR involved. You're going to hold a diligence meeting with all the work streams. HR, here's what you need to look for. Here's what we're looking to understand. Here's what we want to know. You'll have access tomorrow. There's no relationship there, which, like I said, transactional. So when they go in, sometimes they're just really looking at data. They don't know the rationale. They don't understand the true sense. They just had a meeting yesterday. They understand why we want to do the deal. And now they're in a data room. To me, that makes no sense, right? That's why be brought in early. Really understand why we want to do a specific deal, right? What does that deal look like? What's the business case? Read HR into the deal earlier. Give them time to understand it. Give them time to ask questions. Now, when the data room gets opened, they understand they could look at it differently, right? They could interpret it differently. And if there's serious red flags, there's serious red flags. You can't do nothing about that.
I remember my first job in HR M&A. HR was not pulled in until diligence kicked off. And then something happened about 4 or 5 deals in where there was just a pretty gnarly problem. And because I was able to build that relationship, and it happened to be a problem that affected finances, and my undergrad degree is in accounting, so I could speak the language of the business, we suddenly got brought in pre-LOI after creating that. And that's when I knew that I had really developed trust with that team, was when they were asking my opinion on things before the diligence phase. And it was a really good feeling.
Yeah, it's great when you know enough and you feel confident enough to have that conversation with not just corporate development, but the CFO, the CEO. When you have that knowledge and you have the confidence, that's when I say you walk the talk. You truly do have a seat at that table, and you should demand it. And I think every CHRO should be empowered to demand a seat at the table. And if you go through corporate America, I don't know what the ratio is or what the percentage is, 10, 15% really have a seat at the table. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I know it's not a lot, and it should be 100%.
Yeah, I completely agree. So Steve, you've touched on culture a few times. Can we shift a little bit and talk about cultural due diligence? And how do you think HR can help pressure test some of the assumptions that corp dev teams are making about people, leadership, values, fit, all of those elements we think about when we talk about culture?
Yeah. Look, there's the surveys and the data you pull out from the target. You can go on and the Glassdoor measurement and the 30 or 1 hour call you have with the key people, right? It's so short. How do you really measure culture from that? Right. It's terrible. I will say that process is broken. Yeah. And so here's what I do. And again, another reason why HR needs to be brought in earlier. If they're brought in earlier, you have time to really understand the company, the key people, the makeup, the personalities. You get a feeling for the DNA of the organization, right? You have more time to really understand the process. You understand how the company started, how it transitioned from this CEO to this CEO. Why are these head of businesses here? Or why did they leave? You really get time to appreciate all that. You get to hear the stories. You get invited into some of the early meetings, right? You get to ask the questions. Do you have an employee engagement system? Do you have surveys? Can we pull that data in earlier? Spend time with the CEO and their head of HR, right? You bring the two together. Again, you fall away from this transactional part of it, which you only got so much time. Tell me, is the culture right? The other piece is you're spending time with the corporate development leader. You're spending time with whoever's leading that deal. And that person leading the deal has invaluable knowledge on the company's makeup, right? And the HR team should also be working with the corporate development team to help them understand how to identify culture, how to identify people issues, so they could get this early enough for that to be put into diligence. And so you need a mix of data. You need a mix of one-on-ones with the company's people themselves. You need as much information from third-party sources that you can on the culture of the company. And you need to rely on the team to really uncover these things. And you could call it a science, you can call it a process, you can call it something. The ultimate or the end game is to identify where there are issues early, see if they're big enough issues where they're going to kill the deal, meaning like it could be the best deal on paper, the synergies could be there, but as you and I know, integration is going to fall apart immediately. And I've seen it because I've worked with Mercer. I got to appreciate the HR side of and human capital side of the transaction more than just leading corporate development, which I've done. I've seen where I was able to identify culture issues early and expose them to the business leaders or the CEO that wants to buy the company and say, hey, this isn't going to work. And all your job is, whether it's HR or corporate development, is to expose it, right? Make sure everyone knows about it. Come have a plan. Okay, here's, if you still want to go through it, this is how I could see integrating. Maybe we keep this separate. Maybe we integrate earlier. Maybe we move certain people out of this role. And then it's up to the people that write the check if they want to do the deal or not.
We've talked a little bit offline about AI, and I know that AI is being used a lot in culture work. You spoke of Glassdoor, but it's also being used in other places. Do you think HR teams, especially those HR teams working in M&A, are ready for automation, analytics, generative tools, or where do you think AI is going to take us?
It's scary where it's taken us. It's making deals more efficient. It's exposing critical pieces of data and information about a deal earlier, or even identifying things that might have been overlooked. When I say efficient, it is able to move you from A to a lot quicker. Yeah. Now, we know this from a few things. We know this, that the legal document process is getting super efficient from an AI standpoint. What we're starting to see is the M&A data room platforms become super efficient. You and I come from a time where a lot of this was, tedious, manual, it's just painful process, right? Every day you're in that data room, someone else identifies something, and you might get an email message in the old days or a call, hey, take a look at this page in this, it got a little bit more efficient with you tag something and now it gets tagged to you. Great, right? But now you'll open up that data room. When I say now, some of the platforms have it and you see where it's going. The day the data is put into the room or put into the platform, you're getting a glorious, beautiful dashboard of green, red, and what's perfect. Really need to concern yourself. What's yellow, what you need to definitely look at, and what's red, you need to laser in on. It's gonna get so much further from there. I do believe there's gonna be a day where data is dumped in. The AI agents, right? The agents are doing all the work. When I say all the work, they're doing the checks and balances. They're checking for this, checking on it, all based on the acquirer's needs and requirements for the deal. They're quickly identifying issues. It's getting passed over to the right work stream. The right work stream it's all that's going to be done in such a quick and efficient way. What data is missing, what still needs to be filled in. I just a year ago is still going through an Excel sheet of so many, what's still missing, what's still not in the data room, what still hasn't been answered, where is this, where's that? It's gotten more efficient from there. It's going to get super efficient. So that's going to happen. The legal process, as we said, is going well. The project planning of an integration is going to get tied into the work streams and tied into the data that's being pulled in and tied into the synergies that are supposed to be realized, tied into the earnouts. These are all processes that these AI agents, we call them agents because they're doing the work behind the scenes, are all going to be filling out for us. And I'm looking forward to it. What is it going to do? Is it going to rationalize resources that are out there to do deals? In certain ways, yes.
Sure.
And it's going to help the buy side and the sell side do more efficient and get you to the promised land quicker. And what is your job? Your job is to do an efficient, successful deal.
Right.
There's two pieces, right? Successful is great. Ultimately, here's the business case. And did the deal work out? Right. You look at the 1 year, you look at the 90 day, you look at the 6 months, you look at the 1 year, the 2 year, the 3 year, you put that up against the business case. What worked? What do you need to optimize? Ultimately, you want a successful deal, but you want an efficient deal. Efficient and successful go hand in hand. Look, I've seen plenty of messy deals that worked out, plenty of messy deals that fell apart. And when they fall apart, you could say it was messy. But AI will create efficiency and make it so streamlined, and it's going to clean up the process. And then the CFO and the financial teams, AI is already doing modeling and valuation analysis and exposing quality of earnings, exposing so many things that, again, it would take so long to expose before.
It's really going to be an interesting world. Let's go back to where we were as we begin to wrap up. So we started off talking about a seat at the table for the CHRO. Yep. So if we have a CHRO listening right now and they're thinking, I really do want to show up differently. I want that seat at the table, but I don't feel confident enough yet in the M&A process. Where would you recommend they start getting that confidence so that they can really, like you said, bang the table and demand their seat?
There's learning the M&A process, right? Learning what M&A is, and they could do that through platforms like your platform that you have. They could do that through getting training on M&A. They could do that through consultants like myself or plenty of other people out there. There's plenty of other organizations. They need to learn M&A, the process. So yes, they have a job that looks after people and HR, the DNA of a company, but they need to learn M&A and they need to understand what that means, and they'll learn it, right? Anything else, it's a training that they go through. Once they learn it, they start getting more confident about it. They could then knock on the door and say, hey, I want a seat at the table. And I think if you can get to the level of CHRO, part of that, getting to that level should include part of this, and they should be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I often say M&A is a context, and the skills that we use to do good HR M&A are the same skills we use to do good HR. It's
Right.
just a different context.
Exactly.
Flip side, if you're talking to a corp dev leader and they're really questioning whether HR has a seat at the table, what's your case for bringing HR in earlier and more often?
Yeah. I mean, just showing them the data, just showing them the fail rate, showing them, again, like I said, every corporate development leader gets measured on success, right? And if you can quickly identify where things fail from a people perspective in a deal, and you could also quickly identify how HR can make it more efficient, right? And communicating that, having them understand the role of HR in a deal should not just be transactional. There's a strategic need for it. No one should fear that, right? You don't, like, what does a corporate development leader not want? They don't want someone telling them what not to be doing.
Right.
Or why they shouldn't do a deal when they're being pushed to do it from the business leader, right? They're like, oh, HR people, okay, yeah, we'll deal with that later. Truth is, they need to appreciate what HR does, understand the value that they bring, and understand they're your partner in a deal. They're not your enemy. They're not a worker that does a job in the deal, but they're a partner. CFO is a partner in a deal. Technology is a partner in a deal. Your business leader, the business itself that you're buying the business for, is your partner in the deal, right? Whoever runs that business is going to work with you to do the work. HR, similarly. Again, legal, right? Your chief counsel is your partner in the deal. HR is the same thing. They're partners. So it needs to be appreciated.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, Steve, this has been a great conversation. I just really appreciate you bringing so much perspective from so many different angles in the M&A process. For listeners who want to connect, follow your work, or reach out, where's the best place for them to do that?
Find me on LinkedIn.
Perfect. We'll put a link to your LinkedIn in the show notes.
Yep. LinkedIn's perfect to find me.
Fantastic. Steve, thank you so much for coming on to share today. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it too, Klint. Thank you for having me. I look forward to seeing you out there and possibly working with you again on something. And again, good luck and thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Master Your Merger, hosted by Klint Kendrick. Be sure to follow or subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you found this valuable, share it with someone leading through a deal. To explore toolkits, resources, and upcoming programs, including our free roundtables, visit masteryourmerger.com. We'll see you next time.